You want to know how to make that? Good. You're in the right place. Hello everyone. So today we're going to be doing two kinds of sliding doors. The first one is going to be our hidden door, and our second one is going to be our hanger door. Here's the materials you will need for both. So let's get started. So while we can't actually make blocks slide on their own, we can make it appear as though they do with links. And now we're going to use 1/3 increments. Now you might be asking, isn't that impossible? Well, no. And it has to do with hockey stick displays. And if we stack them 9 on top of each other, they are pretty much equal to 10 normal blocks. And this way we can get 1/9, 2/9, 3/9, so on. And so if we stack 6 and 3, then we get our 2/3 and 1/3 increments. So now if we switch to our power blocks and put them up, now we can see that they are roughly 1/3 of a block. So now, to make it easier for you guys, I'm going to color the blocks. So red is going to be our 1/3. Blue is going to be our 2/3. And green is going to be our whole blocks. But when we are going to do our doorway, we're going to run into a problem, because when we stack blocks on top of each other, we can see that they have a little bit of a visual bug. And to prevent this, we're going to be using a monitor. So what we're going to do is we're going to face the monitor this way. So when we put blocks on the underside of the base of the monitor, it will actually push the blocks slightly in that direction. So now when we stack blocks on top of each other this time, we can see that the green blocks actually do not do a visual bug. And if I put another green block on the same plane and move it on the same line as the blue and red, we can see that these actually do the visual bug, whereas the far left block does not. So now we have our blocks that we're going to be using. And we're going to do the same with our door frames so that they do not bug out. So for this door, we're going to be doing a 1 block wide. And you can adjust these to any height that you like, but for the sake of this video, we're going to keep it at 1 so that you guys can better understand what is going on here. So, how Power Block works is when we press play, they behave like normal blocks. And if we hook them up to a source that controls whether they are turned on or off, such as a lever, and we hook up this lever to all of them, that's not what I want. And if we flick the lever, because now there's no power going to the blocks, so they are off, but when we flick the lever to on, now the blocks appear and we can actually walk on them. So now we're going to be using 2 levers. Can you get rid of this? Okay, well, that's the only way to get rid of it. So our first lever is going to be our activator lever. And this is going to be important because this will be our... Wait, no. This is going to be our set lever, and this will be our action lever. So the set lever is how we're going to set our hidden doorway. So what this means is when we get everything connected, we're going to connect our set lever here with these NOT gates, and we're going to have one NOT gate for each of our powered blocks here. So what NOT gates do is if power is going to the NOT gate, it will output no power, and vice versa. So if we press play, we can see that there's no power coming from the lever, so then the NOT gates produce power to the blocks. Now if we flick the lever on, the NOT gates will no longer provide any power to the blocks. Now this is good. So now what we want to do is we want to leave red and blue off, but we want to leave green on. And this is where XOR gates come in. And to make this easier, I'm going to leave one XOR gate out here to show that this goes to our whole block. And we're going to hook up these to their corresponding blocks. So now with our lever, we're going to hook this up to the whole block. And we're going to go to the setting and click the is turned on block here, or check mark. So now when we play, the lever will start in an on position, and because it's on, power is going to the NOT gates, but the NOT gates will make it no power. So now we have our red and blue off. And then we have this NOT gate that goes to the green, but we also have power coming from our XOR gate, which will leave this on. So this is good. So now we're going to go mess with our action lever to make it appear as though the door will slide open. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to hook up some timers. One for each block. And with our action lever, we're going to hook it up to the first timer, and only the first one. And then we're going to put all the timers in a sequence, meaning one after the other. And with our first timer, we're going to hook it up with our first XOR gate, or with the green, and the red. So now what XOR gates will do is they will only provide power when only one XOR gate has a connection. So for example, because this lever is on, it is providing power to this XOR gate. Now watch what happens to the light on the XOR gate when I flick this lever. Now it's off. And because this is off and the NOT gate is still on, now the green is no longer there, and now we have our red, because this timer is now connected to this XOR gate. So now what we're going to do is we're going to complete our linkage of the other timers. And you can kind of see a little bit of a pattern here with the zigzag pattern. And then with our last one, we're just going to hook it up to the final XOR gate and nothing else. And then we're going to move these blocks in our doorway. So now we have this little door here. We flick the lever, and now it appears to be sliding. So you can change the settings on the timer blocks to make the animation go even faster. Right now it's at 1 second, but if I change this to 0.2 seconds for each of them, And I do the same thing. Okay, let's just pretend that didn't happen. So now we have our timers on 0.2 seconds. So now when we flick our lever, the animation goes a lot faster. Now the game is still a little bit buggy, so it might not be 0.2 seconds exact, but this can better show an animated sliding door. So when you're done with all the code, well, not code, but linkage, you can color the blocks whatever you would like. If you want to hide the door or if you want to make it a specific color, there you go. I'm going to turn these back to 1. And then say you want to make a door that is 2 wide, not 1. So what we're going to do, I'm going to drag these out and actually delete these because we're actually going to want these 2 wide. And I should say, if you want 2 wide and 3 block increments. So we're going to do the same process here. So now we have our 2/3 of the doorway and 1/3 of the doorway. Right? Still the same thing. So now because I deleted the blocks before, we're going to have to reset the links with the NOT gates and the XOR gates. And we're going to drag this out again. And you don't have to drag this one out too, because if I do, actually this is going to run into the links. If I do drag it out, and Piggy will not allow that. So if I do drag it one more, you can see that it's actually going to go out of our doorway here. So you do not have to stretch your last one. Right? So now we can just put these back in our doorway. And now we have a 2 wide door with 1/3 of the doorway each time. Now, let's say you want 1/3 of a block in a 2 block wide doorway. Well, it's kind of the same process. I'm gonna delete our blocks here again. We're gonna put them in. If I can get my hotkeys right. Right? So we're gonna have our first 1/3. Where'd that go? Okay. First 1/3, first 2/3. We're gonna have another whole block, but remember, we're gonna use the monitor trick for our whole blocks. I'm gonna move our lever back. And we're gonna have another 1/3 and another 2/3. Let me recolor these. And we're going to need more NOT gates and XOR gates. And again, I'm going to leave one XOR gate off to the side to show that this goes to a whole block. And then remember to always hook up your blocks because you will forget, and I've forgotten a few times, but that's fine. You can always go back and fix it. So now, at some point, if you have a lot more blocks here, you might run out of room because levers have a maximum of 10 links. So what we're going to do to fix this, we're going to delete that. Going to put a new lever, and we're going to use a link hub. So now when we link the lever and the link hub, and again make sure your lever is turned to on, now we can use our link hub to connect to more than 10 links. So I'm going to relink this with our NOT gates and our whole block XOR gates. So that way, when we do play, oh yes, always remember, because I literally just told you I will forget to relink to the power blocks. So now, and this is just to show, we'll have our whole blocks in the doorway, and all of our other blocks are going to be hidden. So now we're going to add a few more timers. Hooked up to the same line. Right? So now, here's the part you're gonna have to remember. So, if you remember, we have this little zigzag pattern. So if we continue that pattern, we're gonna run into a problem. So if we flick the lever, green, red, blue, and then both of them will turn off, which is something we do not want to happen. We want the blue to turn off and the green to stay on. So what we're going to do here is on our transition timer, that's what I'm going to call our transition from our 2/3 to our solid. It's still going to stay on our 2/3 and it's not going to go to anything else. So instead, on our next sequence, we're going to go to the solid or whole block and our 1/3, and you can see the pattern repeat from our first one. Actually, I have to remember to confirm the choices. All right. So now when we play, we're gonna act like we're looking at our door here. And now it behaves like a sliding door. And again, you can change the timers to make it a little bit faster or longer if you'd like. That's always an option. And yes, so I'm going to show you a few examples of this door, and then we are going to move on to hangers. So for hanger doors, we're going to be doing 1/3 block again. So to save time, I already have our hockey stick set up. So let's get to doing our door frame because it's going to be a little bit different from our secret door. So for our secret door, we had our door frame in front of our door blocks, but for hanger, we're going to have them behind. So let me show you what I mean by that. So we're going to use a monitor trick again, but for our frame, we're going to want them behind our blocks. So what this means is we're going to have our blocks like this, using the monitor trick. So now, when we do our power blocks, so we have our whole block here, 1/3, 2/3. And we're going to have another whole block. However, this one, we're going to want to the side. And I will show you what I mean by that here. After I color these, of course. So, this is just a normal whole green block, right? So remember that bug, that visual bug we were talking about earlier? This is what's going to happen on the inside, and we do not want that. So, to prevent that, what we're going to do is we're going to use our monitor trick, but we're going to face it inward. So what this means is, this block is going to be right here. And because our frame is moved to the back, we won't have the visual bug in front. And because we use the monitor trick for here, we will not have the visual bug inside. So then this leaves us with 4 blocks because we want to be able to show the door still here. Because hanger doors don't disappear. That's usually what they do. Unless you want to be fancy, but we're not going to do that today. So we're going to set up all of our XOR gates and NOT gates. So you might be wondering why I have another block here. Well, it's not just because this is a whole block. We're going to be using this later on. But for now, we're going to hook up all of our gates to our corresponding blocks. And then we're going to get our levers. So like last time, we're going to have a start lever and we're going to have an action lever. I'm going to move this a little bit further back. And then we're going to do a link up. You don't have to for this one because we're not going to run out of links, but you guys might run out, so we're just going to do that. And again, we're going to do our NOT gates and our first XOR gate to our first whole block here. So now, I forgot to push this, have this to is on. So now this is what it's going to look like. And then we're going to go and do our timer sequence. So we're going to have one timer for each of these, but we're not going to have one for our last one. So instead of one timer for each of our power blocks, we're only going to have one for each block, -1. So let me link all these up. And then we're going to continue our little pattern like so. Right? And again, we're going to link our lever to the very first one. And now I'm going to slide in our blocks so you can see the animation. And now we have our sliding hanger. So now, what hangers can also do is they can go back. So, how do we want to do this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to have our lever do 2 actions. Now what this means is we want it to do an action while it is in the off position. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a not gate, so that when our lever is off, it will also do something. So now what this is going to do is it is going to do our closing animation. So when I drag my blocks out again, I'm going to connect our lever here. Now for closing, like what we did with our starting gate, we had it connected to our first XOR. So now what we're going to do with this NOT gate here is we're going to connect this to our first closing block, which is going to be this green one. And then we're going to have these connected in ascending order this time from the way I'm looking. We're going to connect our NOT gate to this one right here. And we're going to continue our little pattern. Right? So now we're actually going to run into a problem, and I'm going to have to explain this really quick, because when I start, the lever is going to be off, which will initiate the animation as soon as I press pause. You tell what it is. We had our first green block here on, but when we have our hanger closed, we want this to remain invisible. So how do we do that? Well, it's actually very simple. What we're going to do is we're going to use a NOT gate, or XOR gate. And what we're going to do is we're going to hook up our NOT gate here to this XOR gate. And we're also going to connect our last timer to the XOR gate. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect this XOR gate to our first green XOR gate back here. So now, because we have power going to our XOR gate here, and then this powers the XOR gate here, this will actually turn off, which will mean that this power block turns off. So now that we can see that it is off right here. And I forgot to do something with this timer. So because this timer is connected to the XOR, it will have more than one power, because again, we still have our starter lever turning it on. So now that we have that not connected, now we have our door done. But say we don't want this animation to start off when we play the game. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use a delay action. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to do two OR gates, and we're actually going to disconnect our lever to this NOT gate. So then we're gonna keep this, right? Because this is still going to connect to our timer, XOR gate, and our starting power block. So to use a delay action, what we're going to want to do is we're going to hook up these OR gates together. So what this will do is when I flick this lever, these will turn on, and even when I flick this lever off, they will still remain on because they are connected. So how we make this delay action is we're going to need an additional NOT gate and an XOR gate. Now we're going to connect the lever still to the OR gates, and we're also going to do that with this XOR gates. Now with either of the OR gates, it doesn't matter which, we're going to connect it to this NOT gate, and then from this NOT gate to the XOR gate, and then the XOR gate to this NOT gate. So what we just made here, right? So when we start the game, there's going to be no power going to the OR gates, which means we will have power from our NOT gate to the XOR gate, and from our XOR gate to the NOT gate, which will mean we no longer have power, so our beginning animation will not work. And then when we flick our lever to turn on power, we have our OR gates turn on, which means we will no longer have our NOT gate on, and that means we will have our XOR gates turned on, meaning it only has one source going to it, which will result in the same no power going to our first animation. So now when we play, we will not have our first animation. When I flick the lever once, our open will happen. And then when I flick the lever again, then the close will happen. And I will show you what it looks like with all the blocks together, and then I will show you some examples of this door. Now, you may have noticed that this is still only one block, and that is fine. You can always extend these blocks to be 2 or 3, but that just means that you might have to do more links for your hangar door. So now, when I flick this lever, it will turn, and now we have a sliding hangar door, and if I flick it again, now we have a closing sliding hangar door. And now, I will show you some, examples of this, and then a little surprise at the end. For those that don't know, I made a little bit of an escape room a while back, and recently we made 10 likes on that, so you know what that means. Another escape room. And that will be all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and if you'd like to see more of this, you know what to do. Goodbye.